Pele leaned in and said something to Freddie.
Don't let them change you. Keep working on what makes you different and what makes you special. It was great advice, but it caused me some problems.
But what could change Freddie Adu?
Soccer is going to explode, and it's going to be around this kid.
We were the Beatles. Everywhere we went, it was the Freddie show.
And with that came the expectation, and with that came the pressure.
New episodes of American Prodigy drop Tuesdays from Blue Wire Podcasts.
What is crack-a-lackin', Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Valley coming at you without my co-host Adam Frommel today, but we do have a loaded podcast for you nevertheless, and that's Caps Lock loaded. We are going to be rolling out our look-aheads for as many teams as we can before the start of the season. It'll probably leak into the regular season, but guests galore. They're coming, and it starts now. We're going to talk to Light Years podcast, Sam Esfandiari, today. Follow him on Twitter, at Sam Esfandiari. That's at Sam, Esfandiari. After him, we are going to have TJ McBride, fellow Blue Wire podcaster. He hosts the Rocky Mountain Hoops podcast. He's going to be coming on to talk about the Denver Nuggets. You can follow him on Twitter at TJ McBride NBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. And then we wrap up with a look at the Oklahoma City Thunder's future. Super interesting team over the offseason. I brought on Olivia Punchall from Daily Thunder. She is a senior writer there. She's also co-host of the Crossbolts podcast over there. Follow her on Twitter at Olivia Punchall. That's Panchal. I won't try to waste any more of your time. Let's get to this. Just a quick reminder, though, to rate, review, and subscribe to Hardwood Knocks wherever you're getting your podcasts. Even if you're not using iTunes, though, head over there, search us, throw us that 5-star rating, throw us a 5-star review. We are committed to continuing rolling out the content and appreciate every single rating and commenter and subscriber who downloads every episode that we get. So without further delay, let's get to talking about first the Warriors, then the Nuggets, and then the Oklahoma City Thunder. TJ, welcome to your first appearance on the Hardwood Knocks podcast. It's taken way too long for me to bother you, considering how long you have been a part of Blue Wire Pod specifically, but how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Mandalorian was amazing. I have coffee in my hand, and I'm on the right side of the dirt, so I'm in a good mood today.
The right side of the dirt. That's a great way to give an update on how you're doing. My hot take is I am like Star Wars ignorant to the upteenth degree. I've seen the original 7 like once each, and that's just it. I haven't seen the new ones. I haven't watched Mandalorian. Nothing.
So what's funny is I was like you, like the most casual, I don't care about Star Wars individual. Like, yeah, the movies are fun. They were like fun Marvel movies, not a whole lot to it. Pandemic hit and I had nothing to do in Disney Plus, and suddenly I love Clone Wars. I love Rebels. I'm like ordering books. Like, I have become a Star Wars mega nerd.
Oh, wow.
Past 8 months. Well, there's not a whole lot to do. There's a lot of sitting and staring at the television. So I definitely fell into this whole samurai Western crazy Star Wars universe that I am now a part of. So here I am.
There are much worse ways you could be spending downtime in the pandemic.
That is true.
Maybe by living your life as if nothing's going on, which seems to be happening with increasing frequency. Especially,
I'm in the Midwest, man. You're in New York. I'm sure you see it too. But the Midwest got the whole we're stronger than the coronavirus thing going on out here, and it is not my vibe.
I'm on I think people I'm in the worst, not the worst part, but I'm on Long Island in New York, so there's a lot of that going on here because it's very red where I am. I think is the best way to put it.
That is a very clear way.
I did bring you on to talk Nuggets, though. Their offseason was more eventful than I thought it was going to be, mostly because of Jerami Grant. So I think the best place to start before getting a little bit more granular was just looking at everything that happened. Them getting RJ Hampton, losing Grant. They re-signed Millsap. They have JaMychal Green, who is one of my, as Zach Lowe calls them, siren songs. JaMychal Green is a siren song of mine. What was your just general impression of the Nuggets offseason? Anything you really liked, shocked by, disliked?
My initial takeaway after learning how these things kind of played out over that week and a half of chaos of the offseason, I felt bad for Denver. I know that's a weird way to look at this, but they really, really wanted to get on the Jrue Holiday conversation. And they were. They were one of the finalists for Jrue Holiday until Milwaukee just came out and dropped everything they owned on the table. So, all of a sudden, Robert Covington was not a guy you can pursue. Kelly Oubre is not a guy you can pursue. You can't get involved in those trade conversations. So, okay, let's pivot. things happen. Sometimes guys are going to offer 5 first-round picks for somebody and you just can't match the deal. So they move on to Jerami Grant, who, again, every expectation from Jerami Grant's camp, from the Nuggets camp, was we're going to find a way to get a deal done. We were a Western Conference Finals team. He was arguably the third most important player for our organization. We need to get Jerami Grant back here, and Jerami Grant seemed to want to. Then Troy Weaver called, someone who had connections to who scouted him back during his Syracuse days, convinced him to come. And this is the part that's crazy to me. Despite Jerami Grant's own agent advising him to stay in Denver, despite the same money still being offered by Denver, despite the Western Conference Finals one that they went on last season. Despite all of that, Jerami Grant wanted to bet on himself. And again, that ruined Denver because operating as an above the cap team, because Jerami Grant signed for $20 million, doesn't mean you just have $20 million to spend all of a sudden. Denver only had their mid-level, only had the biannual and veteran minimums. So they had to pivot and find a way to make this work. So overall, watching the way it transpired, Denver did everything right and everything still went wrong. And that is just so deflating, I'm sure, after everything they accomplished this past season for it to go that way. So that was like my immediate reaction when I took a step back and looked at everything that had happened.
Yeah, and I listened to your podcast when you like did the crossover with the Pistons versus Everyone pod and Laz Jackson. I
love Laz.
Yeah, he's awesome. I'll be pestering him soon, just in case he's listening to this. I respect the bet that Jerami Grant made. I think it was dumb, and I listened to you like kind of justify how maybe he has more to offer as an offensive player.
I tried.
When you look at Detroit's roster, just with the crimped spacing, I think it's going to be a disaster for him, and I'll be shocked if he even like continues to hit the same percentage of his catch and shoot threes that he did in Denver and his final season in OKC.
Yeah, 2 things there. Playing alongside someone not named Nikola Jokic is very different than playing alongside Nikola Jokic, and he's about to learn that in a very, very big way. The second thing is, I agree with you. I am all for guys betting on themselves, but this feels a whole lot more like being at the tables in Vegas and your buddy goes like all in on a terrible bet and everyone's cheering anyway in excitement despite how terrible the bet is. Like, that is very much so how this feels to me. Like, everyone in the Nuggets organization is like happy for Jerami. They want Jerami to get the best possible situation for him that he can get. They thought it was in Denver and still believe it is in Denver, but Jerami didn't. And when guys make that decision, it's called free agency for a reason. And I'm happy he made his own decision, right. But this might nip him pretty quick. This might be a very tough decision. Like Ben Gordon said in that infamous interview, those were the worst years of my life being in Detroit. And I wonder if there's a sense of like, this might not go very well, but I hope it does.
Yeah, they have, let's assume Blake Griffin is healthy, and that's kind of a leap in itself. Yeah. They have maybe 3 above average shooters on this team with Blake Griffin, you have Shvi. I wouldn't even throw Wayne Ellington in there anymore, just based off how he's been over the thing. Like maybe,
but it's
Sadiq
terrifying
Bey.
that you have to.
Right.
Like that's the problem. Like the fact that we even have to include him in this conversation of spacing is damning.
Yeah, and so I'll be interested to see how it plays out. I did see, and I think this is natural, like once he left, there were people trying to downplay the departure where it's like, well, now they don't have that money committed to him, which it's probably an overpay, like relative to what, like someone who is just basically 3-and-D. But when you're the Nuggets and you already have your top 2 players, when you just went to the Western Conference Finals, when you've also taken like these cheaper gambles elsewhere, like if Bol Bol hits, Michael Porter Jr. looks like he's going to hit, that's fine to pay Jerami Grant that money. Way more justifiable than the Pistons, in my opinion. But they pointed to like the on-off defensive splits for him, where Denver was so much worse. And it seems just for me, afar, when you look at like a lot of the lineups he was in, it feels like those were detrimental to that. But I'm just wondering if I'm wondering if overall, like how you would explain that. Is like that the correct way to look at this? Because I dug into the lineups and I was like, oh, this is a rough lineup.
People forget, like, people just want to look and be like, wow, in the playoffs, he was really good, but his numbers over the whole season are bad. There's so much more nuance to on-off splits than that. He was playing off the bench with a bench unit that had no idea what they were doing for the first couple months of the season. Like, they were an abject disaster on that end of the floor. And I'm sorry, your defensive numbers on a bench unit not guarding the elite players in the NBA when that's your skill set is not going to be indicative of the kind of defender you are. Right. So while I like to hope as a Nuggets point of view that those numbers are actually true, I don't buy into them at all. There's a lot of other factors that play into this. What I will say is that, yeah, the rebounding is a big issue. Is he really going to be able to create off the bounce? Because there were a lot of difficulties there in the playoffs. I actually believe it's possible, but you're 18 months away with a lot of reps before he actually becomes that like Pascal Siakam archetype. Not that level of player, but that archetype of player. So I don't know what this is going to look like. I hate that Detroit roster the way it's currently constructed, and I don't think it's going to do anything to make Jerami Grant look good. But to at least give Troy Weaver some credit, even if Jerami Grant looks terrible and they get into the third year of this deal and they get to the trade deadline, there are going to be a line of contenders who still want to try and trade for him. This is not necessarily circumstances to where the completely negative asset for them despite the contract, but it's still very confusing.
I've actually thought about that because, you know, he has like this, it's I don't even know what it starts at. I forgot to look at it, but like, so it's like 20 million annually on average. There will be like contenders that want him, and there are like a lot of kind of like sizable expirings out there. Like it could even be this season where maybe it's not working out. Like he's just not playing well. Detroit's going nowhere because that's just definitely where they're headed. They're not. Even if Blake Griffin's healthy, I don't know that I would pick them to make the playoffs or the play-in. So yeah. I could see like a scenario where he's like doesn't even finish this season with the Pistons.
That would be wild. If they are able to flip him for like a first round pick, that would be actually like a very shrewd move overall, because there's a lot of contending teams if they can get the salary to match to where he is a legitimate upgrade for them going into the playoffs. So we'll have to see. Again, I think Troy Weaver has some idea of what he's doing. I don't think he's like, we're going to have all bigs. Like, I don't think that's like the vision of the Pistons, because all they have on their books in 3 years is Mason Plumlee, Jerami Grant, and all of their picks. So that's fine. That's exactly what you want to do as a rebuilding team. It's just very confusing this year in a vacuum.
Yeah, look, still, I'm the Mason Plumlee contract.
I will defend that one. I did this on Laz's podcast.
Please defend it, but I want to say where I'm coming from is like if you're going to spend money on Plumlee, guarantee Jahlil Okafor's contract. I would rather spend the little bit extra that it would have costed to have had Christian Wood. That's all. They obviously know more about him than me, having had him all year. That's where I think it looks a lot worse. And I think if you look at other big man contracts in Mason Plumlee's defense, knowing what he could do as a passer, how he's just like his IQ for the game in the half court seems like it's really there. The salary isn't egregious, but for the Detroit roster, and then given the primary alternative, though, that's where I think the huge miss was. And then, yes, in the moment when they still had Dwayne Dedmon, when it looked like they had a jillion bigs, Tony Bradley was on the roster, it also looked pretty damning.
This is what I said on Pistons vs. Everybody. It is truly laughable, and it is worth all of the jokes that it has gotten for that contract for Mason Plumlee. But when you look closer at it, he is the perfect big for all of their young guards and young guys on the roster, from Sadiq Bey all the way through. He is the guy who will roll hard, set great screens, dive for 50-50 balls, do whatever he can on defense to cover up for your rookie mistakes. Like, I can't even count the number of times that Michael Porter Jr. got obliterated on the perimeter, and Mason Plumlee appeared from nowhere to save him from looking like a complete lost puppy on defense. So those kinds of things are going to be hyper important to a Detroit Pistons roster who needs to start developing the right habits. And he's going to do it all with a smile on his face. This is a guy who was a starter on a playoff team in Portland, came to back up Nikola Jokic, and he did everything he could to make that team the best version of themselves. So the Mason Plumlee part, like, again, in a vacuum, everything else around it makes it look way funnier than the actual deal is. But I think that he is probably going to be looked at as the more productive contract than Jerami Grant in the long run.
I think that's fair. And he, again, will make a lot more sense on the roster when it looks like they're bottoming out, because you want solid veterans who are willing to play on bad teams. So if you trade, let's say Griffin's healthy and you move him, there's no way Derrick Rose finishes the season in Detroit.
Yes.
They need to clear the runway for Killian Hayes there, another below average shooter at the moment. But
yes.
So having that presence there, where I think, like, let's just look at Oklahoma City for a second. I don't think George Hill and Al Horford are going to be particularly excited to be there if they have to finish the season there, and Horford probably has to. To bring this back to the Nuggets, though, Grant is the type of player for them that seems like way more important in the playoffs because of how their run into the conference finals and into the NBA finals has to go. Who do those bigger wing assignments now fall to? Like, I look at the roster, and look, because even Torrey Craig in that aspect is like,
yes,
okay, he's gone. So now I don't even have an easy default option, because I think you can pretty easily make the case that Gary Harris is their best perimeter defender now, but he doesn't have like the size or the length to match up with the guys that Jerami Grant and even Torrey Craig were going up against.
They lost. So of their 4 best defenders, Gary Harris, Jerami Grant, Mason Plumlee, Torrey Craig, they lost 3 of them, and one of them has been more injured than he has not been going forward. So we have absolutely no idea what the defensive identity of this team is anymore. None. 0. This is why I have completely removed the Nuggets from the true contending tier in the NBA Western Conference. Like, I just don't think that they're in that category anymore. They're in that Dallas, Phoenix, Portland, Utah grouping all of a sudden because they just don't have that ability to match up. And you have to be able to match up with jumbo wings in this version of the NBA playoffs. So I have no idea. To be honest with you, there isn't a right answer. They're going to hope Gary Harris can do it. They're going to hope Michael Porter Jr. takes a leap. Maybe Bol Bol is something. Maybe PJ Dozier carves out a role. But it's not enough. They don't have enough current big perimeter defenders who can be a 3-and-D big. Like, that's become a hyper fascinating role in the NBA. These 3-and-D bigs who defend all over the floor and are willing to do whatever it takes and fill in all those gaps. They don't have that. And there's like 6 dudes who can fill that role in the NBA. So maybe Zeke Naji is already more prepared than we thought, but like, that's really where Denver is at.
They like don't even have the idea of the players like between 6'7" and 6'9". Like, they just don't even have those guys.
Will
Like,
Barton is their only backup small forward. Like, that's where they're at in terms of the wing situation now.
This is not to give people a reason not to listen to this podcast, but like, I feel like talking about Nikola Jokic gets boring because he's so known. Like, he's an entertaining player, but what are we debating about Nikola Jokic anymore?
There's nothing to debate, right?
Right. It seems like what could make this team at least the level of threat it became last year. And full disclosure, and it was publicized, I got so much shit for it. I picked the Nuggets to win the title this past year before the season started. It looked a lot better when they made it to the Western Conference Finals, but that's a pick that I did not stick with as the year went on. But for them to be at that get into the Western Conference Finals conversation, it feels like I know people might focus on Michael Porter Jr. or Gary Harris, like having an offensive conscience for the entire season, but it feels like it's Jamal Murray. If he is he's not going to be, there's no way he's going to score like he did in the bubble at points. But if he's like kind of had the breakthrough to, hey, he's an actual star now, like the top 25 to 35 guy, that might be their path back to being, I would say, at least as dangerous in the regular season. I still don't know about the playoffs. Just because the defensive matchups will matter there. But what are you going into the season like looking at from Jamal Murray or expecting or just wondering about?
There's just one word, and this has been the word for the past 3 years: consistency. Can you do what you did in the bubble? Can you do it in November when it's cold in Minnesota? Like, can these things become something that you can rely on? Can you know you're going to get 18, 4, and 4 every single night from Jamal? Right now, that is still a question to be solved. We have no idea. We saw him do what he did in the bubble, which was out of this world. Like, I had no idea that Jamal Murray would not only become Michael Jordan level scorer, but be defending like he did, to be bodying dudes in the pick and roll and creating passing angles, to be finishing at the rim the way he did. Like, all of those leaps were way more important to me than the scoring because he got hot. Like, everybody got hot in that bubble. There wasn't a soul who shot worse in the bubble compared to the regular season. So, like, I'm trying to remove the scoring aspects to a degree. There was no fans, endless sight lines. It was amazing for a shooter. But the defense, the playmaking, the added strength from the hiatus, those are things that are absolutely going to go forward and actually help the Nuggets. But I don't think that's what you need to be able to get to that next level in the playoffs. He doesn't fix the biggest issues the Nuggets now have. And the only way you can fix the biggest issues that they now have is to find a player outside of your roster who can do it. And unless Michael Porter Jr. takes a leap that literally nobody sees coming, including the Nuggets organization, which will not put that pressure on him, they're not going to be like, Michael Porter Jr., we need you to be third team all defense. Like, you can't do that. You know what I mean? But you need that kind of caliber of player at that position to be able to contend in the Western Conference Finals right now. So I don't think that Jamal Murray will hurt them. I think he will get better, and I think that they could actually potentially win more regular season games, but I don't think that it's going to translate to playoff success.
I guess the one element where scoring could really, if he's more consistent, like as an off-the-bounce scorer in crunch time, where Nikola Jokic has been like one of the best crunch time players for 2 or 3 years now, to now have Murray on top of that, if there's a level of consistency there, I think what's still the memory that typifies his entire career arc to me is that was it 2008, the Spurs series? Was that 2019, 2018, whatever that was?
Yeah.
Where he won them 2 games, but like lost them 1.5 games. Like that was the Jamal Murray experience to me in a nutshell.
Yes. Man, I will never forget that game too. He was like 0 of 13 or like 1 of 12 or something entering the fourth quarter, and then he scored 18 in the fourth and won the Nuggets the game. And if they lose game 2 at home with home court advantage after being down 0-1 to the Spurs, like you out in the first round. That's it. Well, maybe not the Nuggets. They do like winning from 3-1 comebacks. But regardless of that, this is beyond that. This is before. I don't think that you win that series. But at the same time, honestly, that series changed because they put Gary Harris on Derek White. Derek White was just abusing Jamal Murray. It didn't matter. Derek White had 32 points in game 2.
Yeah, he was volcanic in that series. Yeah.
Destroying Jamal. And that's why when I talk about this playoffs, his defensive performance in this playoffs was like exponentially better than I had ever seen him play for an extended amount of time. And that's probably the most important thing to me. But yeah, he was a volatile character in that first playoff run for the Denver Nuggets of this iteration of their franchise.
You mentioned Michael Porter Jr. before and how Denver's being realistic about his expectations this year. So what are those expectations? Like, is he going to, not even will he start? Do you think he'll be a closing lineup staple? Does it all come down to how well he plays on defense? Like, because that seemed to dictate his playing time this past year was how, I don't want to say good, but like when he wasn't like actively hurting them on defense, like he was allowed to play. Is it still like that type of situation?
I don't know, because again, like this is the hardest part about the time of COVID. I'm not there watching where he's playing in these runs. I'm not able to talk to coach in person and see how he reacts to these things. Like things are so different now. It's hard to get a gauge on it. What I will say is this: if Michael Porter Jr. does not start and he does not get the reps he needs to start developing himself to play at this caliber of basketball, the Nuggets are done. They are well aware. Like Tim Connelly called it a poorly kept secret that they need Michael Porter Jr. to take a leap this year because all of their eggs are now in his basket. They could have gotten Drew Holiday if they put Porter on the table, I bet. They could have traded for almost anyone in basketball that is arguably available for trade if they included Michael Porter Jr. They didn't. They lost Jerami Grant. They lost Torrey Craig. They lost Mason Plumlee. You got to show out now because every little bit of their hope for the future is predicated on him becoming something that he was not last year. And he was good last year, but the consistency, the ability to fit within a team construct, the defensive attention to detail, all of those things are now the most important things for Michael Porter Jr. and the Nuggets. So he is the pivot point. If everything is going to revolve around his development this season in terms of where the Nuggets can end up by the end of it.
There's like, what's sort of weird about that is I feel like he could be in, like, let's say play 25 to 30 minutes a game, like be the same like offensive weapon in a nutshell that he was last season. And I actually don't know how much it ends up moving the needle for Denver because they're not going to have a problem doing those things with or without him. And like, yeah, I mean, I forget what the exact number was, but I remember right about like he had an insanely high effective field goal percentage late in the shot clock. So yeah, there's always going to be like, that's going to have super value. But unless he's like going to be a good defender, I don't know how far he can push this team. And so I'm just curious, like, do you see there were plays where for me watching like a couple games where it felt like he was making like some pretty, what I felt like were, I don't want to say like solid rotation. They were like better than average rotations where it felt like he was anticipating things off the ball, but like he was like, were they frequent enough for you to believe that he'll ever be a good defender? Or are you like kind of more on the pessimistic view of it? Because I have zero feel for what you can expect from Michael Porter Jr. defensively moving forward.
So he did have some like legitimately like NBA quality rotations defensively. And like running joke on Twitter is me turning to Matt Moore during Nuggets games and being like, you see the tools that Michael Porter Jr. has on defense? Like you see how good that could potentially be? Because there is like the physical ability of Michael Porter Jr. is devastating defensively. He's so agile in terms of being a perimeter defender because his hips actually do move that he can get into passing lanes. He can swallow dudes up. He can just get wide and contain on the perimeter, but he can also rotate from the weak side and block shots. Like to have a wing who can do both of those things is so hyper rare in this NBA setting. But my question is this: is Porter going to get so good offensively he just stops caring about defense? This has always been my question because And credit to Michael Malone. I think that Michael Malone deserves way more respect for the way he has handled Michael Porter Jr. because if you don't instill these defensive principles now, he will never get them because he is that gifted offensively. Like you said, just a stupid effective field goal percentage at the end of the shot clock. He is one of the most gifted shot makers from anywhere on the court, off the bounce, off the catch that is in basketball right now. He is a God-given talent in that regard. But is he ever going to care about defense enough? If he gets too good offensively, I think all of a sudden you see him start to stop caring about the rest of it. I'm sorry, that is really where I fall on this. So hopefully Michael Malone is just drilling this kid again, because if they don't get that defensive impact from him, you're not winning, even if he averages 25 and 12 a night.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering, the other player that I have this like sort of same question about is Gary Harris. I know injuries have like dogged him basically the past 2 seasons, and he did his 3-point clip. I think when you look from like February onward was like, it was good, but he's just been such a roller coaster on offense to the point where it's felt like he just even shouldn't be on the floor at times and hasn't been on the floor at times that the Nuggets would need him. Like, is there like, I don't want to say is there pressure on him, because there's pressure on everyone every season, but you're reaching the point where it almost feels like if he's not the Gary Harris he was when they signed him to the extension, like, is there even, like, how big of a point is there in them keeping him? Like, where they shouldn't actively be looking to move him at that point. It feels like that's the type of the season that he's entering now.
Yeah, I just don't know what asset will be out there for you to get for him. Like, are you going to trade a negative asset in Gary Harris and move something with him just to move off the money? Like, I just don't think Denver's going to get to that point with Gary. Plus, he's the longest tenured Nugget on the roster. They adore Gary Harris as an individual. They want him in a Nuggets uniform for the long haul. But again, now they're at the point now where they have to start asking the questions that you were posing. Is he able to actually even play enough? And when he does play, will he even be efficient enough? The most glaring, brutal stat that I had last year was pre-All-Star break, which again was only like the entire regular season minus 10 games. So it was virtually the entire regular season. Gary Harris was one of 2 starters in basketball to shoot under 40% from the field and under 20% from 3.
Awesome.
Justice Winslow, who played 12 games, and Gary Harris, who was playing 30 minutes a night. Like, you cannot be the least efficient starter in all of basketball if you're going to earn minutes and have trade value going forward. It cannot happen. And then he gets injured again with his lower body stuff that he keeps having. He now has, if I remember correctly, 15 lower body injuries, 14 in the last like 30 months.
Wow. I didn't realize the number was that high.
It was foot, hamstring, shin. Then he had like an ankle issue. Then it was the core issue. It's literally nonstop. Like, I've always had this perspective that it was very similar to Terrence Ross earlier in his career. He was lifting like a football player, trying to jump out of the gym with all that weight, and the lower body just couldn't handle it. Gary Harris could have been an all-pro NFL receiver. He was recruited to play both football and basketball at Notre Dame. So like, he could have been a Megatron caliber receiver. So the dude, in terms of his size, jumping like that, I can see why it doesn't hold up very well. So everything is going to be a big deal with Gary Harris. No one's going to put their eggs in that basket. But if Gary Harris becomes the Gary Harris of 16-17, the Nuggets go right back up into that status, in my opinion. There's nobody's willing to bet on that right now.
Yeah, and I mean, you're not going to move him I think the idea of him is still like his contract wouldn't be super tough to move, but you're right, with 2 years and whatever it is left remaining, that's not going to be like a positive value in a deal. And it's interesting you mentioned that they could have gotten Drew Holiday had they included Michael Porter Jr. I'm curious as to if they could have there's no way they would have gotten Drew Holiday if that Milwaukee offer was on the table and they were including Michael Porter Jr. And so it's like to have like that. And I think part of that is because Gary Harris Milwaukee gave up all the picks, but like when you're moving Gary Harris in a deal like that, it's more so for salary matching than it is as like a value play, because you don't want to pay Gary Harris 2 years and $39.6 million in a vacuum.
And the other hard part is when teams call, when they try to salary match, they're like, what about Will Barton instead of Gary? And Denver's like, no, like, we want to hold on to Will Barton. We believe in Will Barton. We want him to play. And that's a fascinating part of the discussion is everybody could call him for Will, but they keep trying to pitch Gary. And again, it seems like this is not necessarily something that like is happening with every single trade call, but this has happened here and there. And that's a tough place to be as Denver. And that's not a good situation for Gary Harris to be in.
Yeah. And that was one of my questions is, so who's like more important, useful, whatever to this team, like if they want to be a contender next season? Is it now officially Will? Yeah, and I mean his season last year was like verging on unreal.
No, people don't realize how great Will Barton was for this Nuggets team during the regular season last year. Like he picked up the Tyreek, who was it? Tyreek Evans. I almost forgot his name. I haven't talked about him in so long. The Tyreek Evans mantle of the only dude who plays under 30 minutes a game who's averaging like 18, 6, and 5. Like he is just a walking production. Like he always finds a way to get you what you need. But my thing is, I look back on that Lakers series that they had in the Western Conference Finals. If Anthony Davis does not hit that game winner, which let's be honest, those are all coin flips. If that does not fall, Denver had 2 other coin flip games, and they did it without Will Barton, without being able to reverse the court. They were running Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, pick and roll, dribble, handoff till the sun died, and everybody knew it was coming, and you couldn't get the ball to the other end of the court to run any other offense. So if they had Will Barton, a 6'6" slashing guard who can also shoot from 3 off the bounce or off the catch, can use a pick or doesn't need a pick to get downhill, attacking a bent defense, that changes the entire complexion of that series, in my opinion. So Will Barton is one of the most underrated picks for most improved player or comeback player of the year, I think, this year, because the Nuggets are going to need everything from him. They don't have the depth at the wing position. They might not have the health at the guard position. So Will is going to be asked to do a lot, and his defense took a significant step forward last year, as did his rebounding.
Yeah, I could not believe, because he was so injured too, like the season before this past one, I couldn't believe how much better he looked on defense. Like it was probably the best defense he played in his career. I'm not like too familiar with how he was in Portland, but it easily seems like that in Denver. And I wonder if they get to, like, I don't think you could turn to him and be like, you know what, you're going to be the one that has to defend these wings now. But it seems like if the discrepancy in value between him and Gary Harris remains this large, like Denver might just get to a point where it feels like, you know what, Paul Millsap, insofar as you're healthy, you're a defensive anchor, and then we're just going to have Barton, Porter Jr., Murray, Jokic around you, and like we're going to lean into offense, and that might just be how they have to. I don't want to say like win every game, but like offense is gonna have to be their identity more so than it's ever been during this. And Jokic
Michael
era.
Malone cries as you say this, and like that's the one thing that's going to be fascinating. Michael Malone has always been a topic of it's a polarizing topic amongst fans. Every coach in the NBA is a polarizing topic amongst fans, but Michael Malone's a defensive first guy. Like he's been trying that forever, and now you have to try and find to get the best offense out of this roster in order to win games. Is Michael Malone going to pick up to do that? It's going to be fascinating, but it's going to be another thing I wanted to add to the Will Barton portion of this. Jerami Grant was not asked to defend the elite wings in the NBA during the regular season when things started. He was playing off the bench guarding power forwards. That was what happened. Will Barton was the one taking LeBron James, backing him down in the post. It was Will Barton who was really doing his absolute best. He wasn't great at it, but the effort, the intensity, the length, and the fight was all there to at least make it somewhat more difficult. So again, if we're trying to pretend like we have any idea what a closing lineup would look like against a team like the Lakers, I'd probably put Will on LeBron. I'd probably put JaMychal Green or Paul Millsap on Anthony Davis, and that's kind of how the Nuggets are going to have to match up.
Yeah, I remember when I was looking, when I was doing the outline for this podcast, I was looking at the matchup data for like some of the Nuggets' other wings and was surprised to see like how much time Barton had spent on like a Jason Tatum. So I guess he's going to have to do more of that this season. And he'll
accept it. He loves the battle. Like, you want to throw me the toughest dudes in the league. I'm like he's like an old school play on concrete courts, pick up maniac. And if he gets that opportunity, he loves that opportunity. So I do anticipate seeing quite a bit of that this season.
This is going to be a question that's very near and dear to Adam from L's heart here. But what do them, giving up an asset to get RJ Hampton now, or they essentially said, you know what, you're more valuable than this distant first round pick, and they have Campazzo. What does this say about like Monte Morris, who is now in a contract year? He's one of I have to go through the list of backup point guards, but he's top 3 backup point guards in the league, without question. Sure. Does this infer anything about how they view his future in Denver?
No, it does not. Denver wanted to have more playmakers. They were abundantly aware of how at a disadvantage they were in the playoffs, only having 2 dudes on the same side of the court who can create for others. It was so obvious to them. So the RJ Hampton pick too, by the way, that has nothing to do with this season. Not a damn thing. The Nuggets now have a young core for their young core. So like that's what Tim Connelly is doing with that one. Like you got Zeke Naji, RJ Hampton, and Bol Bol basically there to back up your new your actual young core of guys that you have now. So RJ Hampton has nothing to do with Monte Morris, nothing to do with Facundo Campazzo. It was a best player available pick on a team that does not need him right away, that they can slowly bring along to potentially be the ideal shooting guard for this team in 3-4 years. Monte Morris, though, everything I've heard is the Nuggets want to get an extension done with him. They want Monte in Denver. They are well aware of how valuable he is around the league as well. There are a handful of teams that would start Monte right now, including Detroit, by the way. Right away out of the gate. But Monte Morris is valuable. Denver does not want to get rid of him, and they're going to play him. Even if Facundo Campazzo is coming off the bench with him and they're playing 5'11", 6'1" backcourt, they're cool with it. Let's get the playmakers. Let's see how it fits, and let's run with it. So Monte is a part of this team until I have heard otherwise, which I have not. Every intention is they want to keep Monte in Denver.
He's probably their second or third most attractive trade asset behind Michael Porter Jr., depending on how you feel about I think the allure of, you don't have to pay RJ Hampton for a while was just drafted. Like, he might just be up there. Maybe some people are really in love with Bol Bol or something, but
there are a handful of teams that are like real in on Bol Bol.
So yes, I would still say like second or third behind him, like Michael Porter Jr. And so if they do make and that's probably a question for later, so I won't step on that, but Adam will be happy to hear that this does not imply anything sinister that Monte Morris will no longer be playing in the state of Colorado. And you already answered this really, but so RJ Hampton is we shouldn't really expect to see him get a crack at all this year.
The only way I see him playing is because Denver's resting everybody to start the year because they just got back from the bubble. And they're like, screw it, let the kid play. Like, that's the only real reason that I see him playing legitimate minutes. If he gets like a legitimate rotation spot, something went very, very good or very, very bad, one way or another. So I don't anticipate it. It's not off the table, but no, he's going to be a G League player if the G League exists. However, they figure that out. And that's kind of my envision of how his role will look.
Yeah, if they can't figure out the G League stuff, that ends up being like really damaging for players in his situation where they're on a good team. And how are you going to get
I want to push back on that. These two-way guys do not get to practice with their actual NBA team very often because they're trying to save the days.
Well, didn't
they only have they changed it this year to 50 games. So, but what I'm thinking is if there's no G League, you're literally with the team every day, practicing every day, getting work with the guys that you are eventually going to play with every day. I do wonder if there's a little bit of helpfulness to a lot of these guys who are almost in a player development year as opposed to getting real minutes against like the G League select team.
I still feel like that actual game run, where if you're going to go up against these guys in practice, that they're probably not, and especially this season because of the truncated schedule, like how many of these guys are actually going to be practicing throughout the regular season. But that is really a good point. I forgot to ask this before moving off of Campazzo. The two questions I have is, one, is it actually legal to have him and Nikola Jokic on the court at the same time? Because I'm not sure.
I don't care if it is. If that's criminal, I'm a criminal, and I'm happy to be here. Lock my ass up for talking about Facundo Campazzo and Nikola Jokic too much.
The hockey assist, like, highlight reel potential of this team now. Like, if they're both touching the ball in the same possession, oh my God.
So I just recorded a podcast on Facundo Campazzo's best case scenario for this season, right? Just envision this. Jamal Murray, Facundo Campazzo starting backcourt because Gary Harris is not able to give you enough. Then you have Michael Porter Jr., JaMychal Green, and Nikola Jokic. So Porter blocks shot, Jokic grabs rebound, outlets to Campazzo on the break, who is now attacking a slanted defense on the move with Jamal Murray just scorching down the court without anybody to grab him. There are so many ways that you can just destroy any kind of defense in front of you by having Campazzo with that group. I really do wonder if Facundo Campazzo can fight for that starting shooting guard position. Wow. And if he does, oh boy, that's going to be fun.
Well, that's what I was going to... Looking at his, I did not watch him. I've not watched a ton of like...
I'm way too in on Facundo, so it's probably a good balance here.
So you look at his 3-point splits with Real Madrid. When I say they're all over the place, like I'm not kidding. And they are all over the place. Does that concern you at all? Because if he's going to be in those lineups, he's going to have to be like... He's not going to, I don't think he's going to be a great defender at the NBA level. And so his value will be if he's playing with Jokic and Murray at the same time. There needs to be some off-ball value there. And if he's not hitting like those, standstill 3-pointers, that could end up being an issue, but that doesn't seem to concern you. You're shaking your head. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I'm not concerned. He was asked to take an extremely high level of difficulty shots on Real Madrid in unopportune circumstances. They didn't have a whole lot of just like incredibly brilliant, gifted guys like that who can just go get their shot from anywhere on the court. And Facundo can do that. It's very similar to the Devin Harris 3-point shooting splits in Dallas. They were like, Rick Carlisle was like, there's 2 for 1. Devin Harris, go shoot it. Like, I don't care if you miss every single one of them. And it skews those numbers. And I really, really do wonder if that was at play here, because he's not like an elite Seth Curry, Steph Curry 3-point shooter. That's not what I'm trying to pitch here. The shot versatility is incredible. He can shoot off the bounce going left, right, or stepping in. He can shoot off the catch going left, right, jumping into his shot, stepping into his shot from a standstill. Whatever the versatility that you need as a shooter, he can bring. He is an incredible floater artist, knows how to get into the mid-range, is very creative finishing at the rim as well, and he has learned how to maximize his size and not make it an impediment to his game offensively. So I very much so believe in his shooting, and I think it's going to look a lot better as a complementary player alongside Nikola Jokic than it ever did at being asked to create everything offensively for Real Madrid.
The Nuggets clearly believe in him too, because you give him multiple guaranteed years, correct?
Yeah.
I think so.
Full biannual, 2 years, $6 million.
Yeah. So that took me aback a little bit, but they're clearly, it's obviously not a huge investment, but to give him just the 2 guaranteed years, I thought that was a fairly big sign of how confident they are that he can make an impact.
They really do like him. Tim Connelly, Marty Pashas, actually, who was a scout and a front office advisor for the Nuggets, he actually played with him going back to some random, I can't remember which league it was in. Oh, it's going to drive me crazy. I want to say it was Turkey, but I can't remember for sure. But the Nuggets have a scout who actually played with him, and they are friends on the team. So, that is a part of it that allowed them to know so much about Facu leading all the way up to this point. It's been 3 years of them talking about trying to get Campazzo to Denver.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it had been that long.
They've really liked him. And again, it's same things like the Rockets have always wanted to bring over Sergio Llull. It's been 6 years of them saying this, never got it done. Denver did with Facundo.
So, Bol Bol, next, do you see him kind of looking at the Nuggets depth chart now? It feels like there's a chance he could become part of the backup 5 rotation, but is that possible? Because I also, from what I've seen in the quotes coming out of training camp, Isaiah Hartenstein clearly believes that he's getting minutes. I don't know how I feel about that. The
Nuggets love Isaiah Hartenstein. They think that there is so much untapped potential there that has not been able to shine because of his role in Houston. And they really do think that they got a steal on Isaiah Hartenstein. Bol Bol is not a center right now. That is one thing I've been trying to tell people whenever Bol Bol comes up. You need to toss out the idea of Bol Bol playing center minutes. Unless you're playing a zone for 10 minutes around him, he is not playing center.
He can't really play the 4 though. I feel like that's
3. You want to get weird? Let's get weird. I was talking to Tim Connelly on the Brooklyn courtside seats before a game, and he joked. I was talking about Bol Bol, and he goes, "I was like, what can he play? He's not a center. He can't defend bigger power forwards. What the hell?" And he goes, "Why not small forward?" And both me and Brendan Vogt, who works for DNVR out here, kind of chuckled. Tim didn't chuckle. Tim believes he could play small forward. So then the bubble happens, and the prelims, whatever they call exhibition games. He was actually able to defend small forwards. And it wasn't because he was so mobile and loose. He's so long closing out to shooters, he can take one step from the paint and block your 3-point jumper. That opened my eyes up to a whole new reality of what Bol Bol can be. There is a chance that they just let Bol Bol stand one step outside the paint on his side of the floor, take one step, and close out. That's all he's got to do as a small forward on the weak side. And it makes me so curious what this can look like. Of course, you can just run pick and rolls at him. There's a million ways that you can counter it. But I do think, especially with how thin they are on the wing, there's a chance Bol Bol plays legitimate small forward minutes, not in the rotation, but as a fail-safe.
So you think we actually see it? And then my follow-up question would be, you think he actually, because he can shoot over the top of anyone, so he doesn't necessarily need to do too much, but you think he has the ball skills to actually log time at the 3 at the other end?
Yes. His handles, his passing, and his shooting are fine. I have literally no concerns with that at the NBA level right now. It's everything else. It's can he turn his hips? Is he able to keep up with guys in actual transition defense and actually get back quick enough? It's things like that are more concerning for me. But no, his handles are there. His passing and vision are there. His shooting ability, I was told he might be the best shooter on the roster. So there is something to it.
So what's the backup 5 rotation right now? Is this going to be, we'll see more Millsap there this year? Maybe we'll see Green there as well.
I don't think we'll see much Green there. I guess I'll say it this way. Whoever doesn't start at power forward will get both backup power forward and backup center minutes. So whether it's Jermichael Green or Paul Millsap starting, the other will probably get 6 to 8 minutes at backup center to play small and the bulk of the backup power forward minutes. So other than that, though, it's Isaiah Hartenstein's role, I think. That is what I'm starting to pick up on. They really are excited about what he can bring to the table.
I would actually prefer to see like Green Millsap minutes in tandem than Hartenstein, just minimally of what I've seen from him. But I guess if they're that confident, like it's going to have to be if Bol Bol's not a 5, if that's what we're just saying, which is totally get that. Like it has to be then like Hartenstein needs to play, or it's going to have to be Najee. Like I don't know, like those options for a team I know Nikola Jokic Nikola Jokic has been durable. He plays a lot, but like you could still lose games in the 10 to 13 minutes that he's just not on the court, which is like what we've seen with other teams. And so the backup 5 rotation for them still feels like it's semi-pivotal. And I guess it doesn't sound like they're committed to try like doing any one thing there. That's interesting.
No. And what's really interesting too is that back at Rio Grande Valley in the G League when Monte Morris was there, guess who his center was? Isaiah Hartenstein. They called themselves the best pick and roll duo in the G League. They have played together tons of times. We're talking like 25, 30 games of experience together in addition to practice time. And that to me, like there is truly something that is there. They think that Isaiah Hartenstein can be a mobile big who can defend on the perimeter, can eventually stretch his shot out to 3-point range, and a guy who can give you just tons of energy, like limitless, endless amounts of energy on the backup end of your center position. So I like the pickup, especially at the minimum. That's a win at the minimum.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, I don't think that we're going to see a whole lot of Paul Millsap or Jermichael Green at the 5. If we do, it'll be bursts to be able to play small for a second as a counter, as opposed to like part of your rotation.
I thought like the Clippers should have went to that more with Green, like during the second units in the playoffs. So maybe that's something that becomes more valuable in the postseason for them.
I think that was more valuable specifically against the Nuggets because there was no one that they didn't have anybody to match up with Nikola. So they were like, all right, let's get someone who's more mobile, more perimeter oriented to get Nikola Jokic out of place defensively. So like, I don't know how much of that was useful for the Nuggets as opposed to a counter for the Nuggets because of what they presented to them.
Well, I think the Clippers, by doing it, they like made the Warrior series competitive the year before in the first round, and I think they should have went like for it harder in their Maverick series. Like I just thought they underutilized. I mean, Jermichael Green stand over here. That's the problem.
By the way, I'm with you on this. If it was me coaching the team, I would be doing this. Like I very much so like playing big, strong, bigger, old school power forwards at center off the bench to play smaller and faster, grab offensive rebounds and just run. Like I really value that type of bench unit play, but I just don't think the Nuggets are going to go that route.
This might be an easy question. What ends up being, and I know it'll be matchup based to some extent, but what ends up being like the most common or most effective closing unit for this team?
So, and again, this is very early, so I'm still playing with this a lot. But right now, my thought is Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Michael Porter Jr., Jermichael Green, Nikola Jokic.
That's what Green over Millsap in those situations.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm looking at Green over Millsap as a starter in general. Like almost anything that you bring to me as like which one would you like to have more of? Like Jermichael Green is my answer. And that is not a shot at Paul Millsap. Jermichael Green has a lot more skills he can bring to this Nuggets team than he has shown on other teams. And I fully believe that his fit and honestly his youth compared to Paul Millsap is a really important addition. Like Paul Millsap has aged. I mean, Paul Millsap will tell you that. He also feels great and he'll say that, but he can't do the same things that he once did. Like in the Utah series, he can't check the roller and then get back to the 3-point line to defend a 3-point shot. Jermichael Green can. And that is just something that you can't do at that age for Paul Millsap right now, which is why I give Jermichael Green the edge.
Yeah, he did seem like he picked up a little bit in the Lakers series, but I don't know if that was a product of how the Lakers play. Like that might have benefited Millsap.
So the Jazz loved relocating their shooters on the weak side as the action on the strong side happened, which made Paul Millsap have to take a beat to re-find the guy that he's defending to get out to the perimeter. The Lakers didn't do much of that. There wasn't as much off-ball like nuance to their ability to attack them. So Paul Millsap knew he was just going to the corner against the Lakers. It wasn't, Joe Ingles just slowly waded his way up the wing and now I can't get there. So that's kind of the difference in those two series in my eyes.
You might have already tipped your hand here because it sounds like you want to see Bol Bol at the 3, but is there a quirky lineup where if you were in charge of the team or Mike Malone said, hey, you could just pick this 5-man unit, I'm going to roll it out right now. Is there one that you would just like to see them test out at some point this year?
Yes, there is. Jamal Murray, Facundo Campazzo, Michael Porter Jr., Bol Bol, Nikola Jokic. Give it to me. Give me all of the offensive, passing, shooting, chaos mess that I can have. Like there's a mismatch everywhere. Like, you can do whatever you want with that group. Like, you can run 4 or 5 pick and rolls at Bol Bol and Nikola Yokitch. You can run 3-4 pick and rolls at Michael Porter and Bol Bol. You can do any sort of combination with either of your guards. Like, the fun and the limitless potential of the offensive game plan with that group is just so exciting to me, and I would love to see them play.
I wonder if Mike Malone would resign on the spot if he was told he had to play that lineup.
I'm drinking water, and I definitely felt it get towards my nose and almost come out from laughing there. Michael Malone would explode. I love Michael Malone to death. That is not how he wants to play basketball. Like, Michael Malone is much closer to like the 2015-16 Grizzlies than he is to that version of basketball. Like, there's just like no way that I'm seeing that work out.
We kind of touched on this like tangentially before, but the Nuggets still feel like they're built for some sort of move just because they have like salary that could be matched elsewhere. They do have. They've only traded one future first-round pick. You still have RJ Hampton sitting there. I guess they could include MPJ, but they have some nice non-MPJ assets as well when you look at Bol Bol and even Monte Morris. Do you see them trying to, not necessarily pulling it off, but trying to be aggressive at the trade deadline to go out and maybe get that body that they're now missing without Jerami Grant? Or is that, they might just hang their hats on maybe getting lucky in the buyout market? Like maybe Trevor Ariza is floating around out there at some point as well and come to Denver or something like that.
So I do think that they saved part of their biannual exception for the buyout market. That would make so much sense to me because they didn't use the whole thing. So I do expect that to be at least on the table. Also, Denver will make every call.
That would be a real weapon with Ariza, who as a player, I appreciate because he's been like a true mercenary where it's like, you know what, I'm going to get paid here and I'll figure out a way to get to another team later. And that's
a 1-year, $10 million deals that he's gotten is incredible.
He's played for like 7. He had to at one point this offseason forget who he was playing for or which team he was on, which is OKC apparently, allegedly.
No, my favorite thing was people were playing this game on their podcast. Justin Russo was, where I was like, who does Trevor Ariza play for? And it was like a trivia game during the offseason. That was funny. No one got it right. But at the same time, though, I don't know if Denver would trade any assets to get a placeholder for Jerami Grant. You have to be talking about a legitimate near star level player or a superstar in your role. Because again, Jerami Grant at like 12-5 is not like a superstar, but he was exactly the type of player in that role that you wanted. So if they can find someone like that, which let's be honest, I don't know of I don't know of a single person that I would trade.
Especially so many of them were like actually moved this offseason where it's like the ones that you could envision being available. Okay, Jay Crowder's now on what should be a good team. So unless Phoenix flops, it's not going to be Jay Crowder. Josh Richardson was just traded to Dallas. And so unless, let's say, Kristaps is just unhealthy, they're worried about cap space next year and they don't want to re-sign him when he opts out, he's not going to be available. Covington was just sent to the Blazers and they gave up 2 firsts for him. They're not moving him.
Kelly in the exact same boat going to Golden State. Like, there aren't players that Denver can just go get. And that's why when people start asking me about like future moves, I'm like, listen, unless Bradley Beal's available, I don't see a whole lot of like shakeup at this point. And they have 7 new dudes in their roster right now anyway. Like, do the Nuggets really want to have even more turnover on that roster? Like, no, it's not your top end of your rotation, but like that is still impactful to your overall team complexion. So I really do like the only way I see Denver going all in is if a guy of Bradley Beal's ilk becomes available, but I don't see them trading for Serge Ibaka, who finally is able to be traded. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that just isn't going to fit for what Denver's looking for, especially need to send Monte Morris and Will Barton to do it. Like, I just don't see it.
So you see, I guess it would be more likely for them to go all in on a blockbuster than to go out and try and find like someone to fill the role that they lost with Jerami Grant.
Because there just aren't enough players out there who are available for the right price to be able to get that like that. There just aren't.
The one I thought about, and it doesn't work like by itself, but like if you get to a point, the framework would be Gary Harris for Harrison Barnes.
I don't think that would. Are you adding enough defensively with Harrison Barnes? And is his style of play, the Kobe-esque, I'm going to get my shot off the bounce, going to fit within this Nuggets team construct?
I think he's done, since Dallas made him that player after he left Golden State, and I feel like he's done a lot better of a job balancing that out in Sacramento. And if he's willing to do that in Sacramento, he's going to be willing to do that when he plays next to Jokic.
That's a really good point. It's a really good point. But again, that contract's big too. I don't know. I don't like it on the surface. I haven't looked into it enough. There might be something I'm just not thinking about right now. But on the surface, like, does that move the needle for you? I don't think it does. Or maybe it does a little bit, not enough to put you back into that contender category, not to put you with the Lakers and the Clippers. Like, that's not where you end up from that kind of a move.
Yeah, I mean, so he's 3 years, 68.8. Harris is 2 years, 40, basically. So it's the extra year. I think where the concern is you probably at this point would trust Barnes more so at the 4 spot where you're not hard up for talent than you would as like the 3. Like Jerami Grant was like, you could put him anywhere. Barnes doesn't have like that malleability. But I think that's the trouble though, is like that's the move. Josh Richardson would have been my favorite addition for this team, even more so than Rocco.
That was mine as well, because you can put him at the 2. Like, you actually have size, athleticism, and defensive versatility at the shooting guard position for the first time since Nikola Jokic has been in Denver. Like, they just never have had that kind of a wing in the backcourt. That's something that I very much so would have liked.
And he's like, at least Philly didn't use him like this. He was defending 1 through 4 when he was in Miami, which is just wild. So what's a realistic win total and Western Conference standing finish for this team? You can give me the 82 game equivalent. I have the formula lined up right here so I can plug it in.
Yeah, I had 47 with not on an 82 game schedule, on a 72 game schedule. I was hovering right around 46 to 48 wins.
Okay, so if they were 46, that's the equivalent of 52 wins. So 52 to 53, which it feels right because, like I said, it feels like this team might be just as good during the regular season. I feel like where we're going to see it gets worse if no moves are made is during the playoffs, if that makes any sense.
It would be really funny if Denver had their 6th straight season of like a 50+ win rate where, like, you know, again, if there's 82 games, you would have won 50 kind of thing. And they still lose in the first round of the Phoenix Suns in the 4-5 matchup. Like, that's the most Nuggets thing I can conceive of in my brain. So, like, that's kind of how I'm viewing this team right now. They're a good team that can be a top 4 seed who is probably going to lose pretty damn quick in the playoffs because they don't have that upside.
And I think their ceiling would be standings wise. I think you could argue first, but it feels like second would be realistic because I feel like one of the Lakers or Clippers are just going to stumble into being dominant. I don't know that they'll care enough about the regular season. So there's a scenario where it's like, well, the Clippers and the Lakers really don't care, and the Nuggets are kind of built for the regular season, and they have the 1 seed. So they have and then below that, 1 through 6 this year, or let's say 1 through 5 to 6, because the Rockets will probably blow up, I'm assuming. They feel like almost interchangeable at this point in the West, which is part of the madness.
For sure. And again, there's always the aspect that all of these teams in the top half of the Western Conference just got back from the bubble. So, they're not going to be going all in for the first, 6 weeks of the season anyway. They're going to get their recovery in. I don't anticipate the Nuggets playing any of their starters through more than 3 quarters. You know what I mean? That's just kind of where they're at right now. And I do wonder how that skews a lot of these conversations. We just don't know how these teams are going to manage the ridiculously short offseason that they just had.
Yeah, we're talking about expectations, and it's there might just be scheduled rest nights for guys who would normally, murder their coaches if they rested. If the Blazers might rest Dame, if he's not injured, that could actually happen.
Has never said he wants to rest. He has actively pushed back and hates the idea. My vision of Jamal Murray resting is him being handcuffed to a table, not able to leave. Even he was like, listen, man, if there's some rest I can get in the first half of the season, I'm going to take it. Because that's where these guys are at, though. That's a lot to bear, especially when you're playing at this level of competition. Just had 2 3-1 comebacks and then lost in the Western Conference Finals in dramatic fashion. That's a lot to come back from that quickly.
Yeah, I still can't believe they erased 2 3-1 deficits. That's amazing.
And the fact that an anecdote in the past now because we've had to move so fast.
First of all, it feels like a zillion years ago because not only it feels like time has at once sped up and slowed down at the same time, where it feels like an eternity ago that it was March, but how is this year not over yet type deal. Is there anything that I missed that you feel we need to talk about? Anything that you want to get off your chest now that we did not cover?
I don't think so. I think we've covered most of it. Normally I have something that's been running through my brain, but I think we covered it, man.
Hey, I was worried we were going to be too cookie cutter, so I appreciate that. Do we need a Nikola Jokic's nuptials? Maybe those? I want to know what that wedding was like.
Nikola Jokic's wedding, which was hysterical, by the way. I had a Serbian newspaper reach out to me in my Twitter DMs in Serbian, trying to explain to me that Jokic got married so I could put it on Twitter. It's so funny how invested the Serbian community is in every last little thing Nikola Jokic does. I will say this. There's 3 things that Nikola Jokic cares about in this world. His girlfriend, music, and horses. And he got all of those things in his wedding, so I'm very happy for Nikola Jokic. That is all that I care about.
The video of him riding
Dreamcatcher.
Yeah.
Bella Marguerite and Dreamcatcher are his 2 horses back out in Serbia.
That's fantastic. TJ, thank you so much for giving me a bunch of your time. If you guys are not following TJ on Twitter, remedy that immediately, particularly if you're listening to this on his podcast feed and not Hardwood Knocks. He is at TJ McBride MBA. That's at TJ McBride MBA. He is the host of the Rocky Mountain Hoops podcast for Blue Wire Pods. And you can also find his writing all over the place now, which I'm sure he'll be bumping on Twitter when it's all published.
Oh, yeah.
Love talking hoops with you, man. I appreciate you really coming on. This was fun. And rest assured, I will be bothering you again at some point in the future.
And I will be bothering you as well as this podcast keeps getting bigger and bigger. So I'm very, very happy to have been here to talk some hoops and just chop it up for a little bit. It's always fun.
Thanks again, TJ. Take care.
Have a good one, man.